Ambassador Zixthal of the Confederation stood before the assembled council, his crystalline exoskeleton trembling with barely contained fury. For 300 cycles, the Confederation had maintained peace across 17 star systems. Today, that peace shattered like glass against the most unexpected of forces, humanity. "They refuse," Zixthal announced, his voice crackling through the translation matrix. "The humans refuse our ultimatum." A wave of disbelief rippled through the council chamber. The Vryn delegates clicked their mandibles in confusion. The gaseous ethereals pulsed with amber uncertainty. Even the ancient Krell, who had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, seemed troubled by this development. Councillor Maradeth leaned forward, her 6 eyes narrowing. Perhaps they did not understand the terms. They are a young species, barely 2 centuries into void travel. Explain to them again what defiance means. Zixthal had already tried. He had shown the humans recordings of the Confederation's military might. Fleets that had pacified entire sectors, weapons that could crack planets like eggs, technology so advanced it bordered on the divine. He had explained with perfect clarity that humanity's expansion into the outer reaches violated Confederation doctrine. They were to withdraw their colonies, submit to Confederation oversight, and accept their place as a minor species under the Empire's protection. The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, had listened with an expression Zixthal was still learning to read. Then she had smiled. "Tell your council," she had said, "that humanity doesn't do ultimatums." Now standing before that very council, Zixthal struggled to convey the audacity of that response. They claim the outer reaches belong to no one. They say their colonies will remain, and that any attempt to remove them will be considered an act of war. War? Councillor Vexnor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. They have 17 colonies and perhaps 500 vessels. We have 10,000 worlds and 1,000,000 warships. This is not war. This is pest control. The vote was unanimous. The Confederation fleet would launch within the cycle. 3 weeks later, the first battle groups arrived at the human colony of New Terra. Admiral Krelzoth commanded the armada personally. 200 vessels, more than enough to overwhelm any defense the humans could muster. He sent one final warning before opening fire. The humans responded by launching everything they had. Krelzoth watched with amusement as the primitive missiles approached his ships. Confederation shields could withstand plasma storms and gravitational weapons. These crude explosives would barely scratch the paint. He didn't even bother giving the order to intercept. The first missile struck his flagship's shields and detonated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality seemed to fold inward. The shield generator imploded, taking half the ship with it. Before Krelzoth could process what had occurred, 17 more of his vessels simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have functioned. "What are those?" his tactical officer shrieked. The answer came over the communication channel, in perfect Confederation standard. "Quantum disruptors. We figured out how to make your physics work against you. You're welcome to surrender now." Krelzoth did not surrender. He ordered the fleet to advance, to use their superior numbers to overwhelm the defenses. It was the last order he ever gave. The humans had turned their colony into a fortress, and every weapon they deployed exploited weaknesses in Confederation technology that no one had even known existed. When the survivors limped back to Confederation space, they brought news that shook every civilization in the Council. Humanity had destroyed 80% of the fleet, not with superior numbers or ancient technology, but with innovation. They had studied Confederation science for 2 centuries and found its flaws. They had weaponized those flaws. "Impossible," Councillor Maradeth insisted. "Our technology has been refined over millennia. There are no flaws, but there were. The Confederation had grown complacent, building upon the same foundations for thousands of years. Humans, with their brief lifespans and desperate hunger for advancement, had looked at those foundations and seen cracks. The war that followed lasted 3 months. 3 months that reshaped the galaxy. Humanity didn't fight like the Confederation expected. They didn't meet fleets with fleets or trade worlds for worlds. Instead, they struck at infrastructure, at supply lines, at the very network that held the Confederation together. They used guerrilla tactics learned from centuries of warfare on their home world. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into a weapon. They also did something else, something that terrified the Confederation more than any military defeat. They talked. Human diplomats reached out to subjugated species, to conquered worlds, to anyone who had chafed under Confederation rule. They offered alliance, not submission. They offered freedom, not protection. Within 2 months, 17 species had rebelled. The Confederation, which had seemed invincible, began to crumble. Ambassador Zixthal found himself once again standing before Sarah Chen, but this time he came to negotiate surrender. She sat across from him in the ruins of what had been the Confederation's central command station, now a human military base. "Why?" he asked, his voice hollow. "You could have accepted our terms, lived peacefully under our guidance. Instead, you've brought death to millions, chaos to the galaxy." Sarah Chen looked at him with those unsettling human eyes, and Zixthal finally understood the expression she wore. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was pity. "You never understood us," she said quietly. "You saw a young species and assumed we were weak. But humanity didn't climb to the top of our food chain by being gentle. We survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. We've driven species to extinction and nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over. We're not proud of it, but it taught us something you forgot. Survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most adaptable." She stood, extending her hand in that strange human gesture of peace. "The Confederation era is over. Welcome to the new age, one where no species kneels to another." Zixthal looked at her hand and realized the truth that would soon echo across every star system. Humanity had not become the apex predator through conquest or ancient right. They had earned it through the one thing that truly mattered in the cosmos: the will to never stop evolving, no matter the cost.